Welcome back. It's that time of the week. It's time for another episode of The Secret Diaries of a Gay Gynecologist in Paris, a memoir. Yes, you heard right, a memoir by Rafael Herrero, MD, PhD. The Secret Diaries of a Gay Gynecologist in Paris. Caution: may contain adult language. Chapter 5. Courage. Part 2. Paris, mid-February. Frustrated, I called Yvonne, André's a red-headed friend who lived only a block away. Besides, André said she'd have great advice for my CV. "Well, if he says so," she said in her usual sultry voice. "Bring it over. 9's a good time." At 9:02, I climbed the 5 flights to Yvonne's apartment. I felt like I was looking at the world through Van Gogh's eyes. The walls were slanting, the staircase itself seemed off-axis, and each crossboard arched downward in the middle, like a tired donkey's back. This was a typical Montmartre building. I'd been told the hill Montmartre was built on was slowly crumbling, its numerous underground quarries caving in. Its dwellers kept injecting concrete into the foundations of their houses, to no avail. I was getting a bit dizzy. I slowed down. "But it looks all so picturesque," I said to myself. Nevertheless, immediately another voice inside my head said, "If you were in a building like this in Madrid, you'd be saying, 'This is a dump.'" The previous voice chirped, "But this is Paris. It's so quaint." On the 5th floor, out of breath, I knocked on the door. Yvonne was preparing a ragoût de bœuf. The familiar smell of meat simmering and red wine, mingling with the smoke from Yvonne's cigarettes, permeated the room. I proudly showed Yvonne my CV. After a long examination, she politely placed it on her coffee table next to her wine glass and said in her radio hostess voice, the type that at night reaches out to all the insomniacs reaching for repose, "We've got to modify this curriculum to meet French standards." "Standards? What standards?" I asked. "We don't present things this way in France," Yvonne told me. "For instance, it needs to be manuscrit, handwritten." Handwritten? I was flabbergasted. In the times of personal computers and word processing, who would send any professional type of correspondence written by hand? Even in Spain, everything was typed, if possible for clarity and courtesy. "Yes, when people submit CVs in France, the CV needs to be handwritten. Every company has an expert in graphology, and they will be studying your handwriting to make sure that your personality is adequate." As a doctor, I was going to be judged on my penmanship? My CV was at least 10 pages long. I had to send out countless unrequested copies, and they had to be hand-scrawled? I'd be tracing away like a 6-year-old for a lifetime. "And photocopies don't count," she said. Yvonne saw my trembling eyebrows. "Well, you should at least handwrite the cover letter," she said. "And graphology? You're saying that a graphologist is going to look at my handwriting?" "Yes." She looked at my surprise. "I have been told that in some countries you don't have this habit," she thrummed. "It is a discipline particularly developed in France." If I wasn't careful, all my personal shortcomings were now going to be revealed through my handwriting. My mouth agape, she proceeded to tell me about the science of graphology. She had studied it for 2 years. She'd even worked as a graphologist for a while, but she gave the job up, overwhelmed by the responsibility of judging other people's characters exclusively through their handwriting. She told me that the first book founded on the subject was by the Italian Camillo Baldi in 1622. but that the term graphology was coined by a Frenchman, Jean-Hippolyte Michon, in 1875 for the study of human personality through the analysis of handwriting, and another Frenchman, Alfred de Binet, asserted in the early 1900s that, with this technique, one could sort out the successful from the unsuccessful. Still, the discipline sounded like witchcraft. "Are you referring to forensic document examiners?" I asked, eyeing her suspiciously. I had read that experts on forgeries were not very reliable. That night and the subject of graphology marked me so much that years later, in an effort to create postcoital conversation, I made the mistake of asking a doe-eyed lawyer from New York lying in my bed in Paris what his stance on graphology was. "Graphology is hardly used in the United States for recruitment purposes," said the insipid man who had just given me a hand job with latex gloves on both his hands for fear of contracting the AIDS virus, "because it's barely defensible in the face of the numerous employment discrimination laws stating that test scores must correlate with their performance on the job, and that this must be statistically validated. Users may be accused of defamation and invasion of privacy." I was glad I no longer needed an erection. His answer had shriveled mine. "Is this something like Rorschach ink blot tests?" I asked Yvonne. Even those had not been corroborated, although they were fun and cryptic. Yvonne chuckled. "The French have found graphology to be of great use," she answered, pushing back a strand of her red hair. "You can tell me what I'm like just by looking at my handwriting?" She sighed. "I can give you an approximation of what your personality might be like." "Now do that for me," I asked, fascinated, as if I were suddenly before a celebrity psychic. "Well, I don't like to do it for friends," she said, biting her thumb fingernail. "But I will make an exception for you." I immediately grabbed a yellow sticky note and signed my name on it. I'd read in Marie Claire that some people could open up an underwater Jacques Cousteau SeaWorld with a signature alone. She smiled politely. "A signature is not really enough," she said. She lit a Marlboro light. "I need you to write a whole paragraph." She grabbed a book from her overflowing shelves and handed it to me. Le Dictionnaire des Idées Reçues by Gustave Flaubert. "Open it. Copy 10 lines on this sheet of paper." Excited, I did as I was ordered, delighted with the game. A shortcut to getting to know myself. And free. She scrutinized the sheet of paper through her rectangular black glasses. Yvonne's Celtic red hair fell on her shoulders onto the black knitted dress she loved to wear. It hugged her petite body, showing every generous curve, each a voluptuous promise. Although she wasn't very tall, her personality made her look much larger than she really was. She was perfect. She studied my handwriting, occasionally blowing streams of smoke into the air like Lauren Bacall, the sheet of paper slightly trembling under the nicotine edge. I perused the naked forearm that held the page in the air before her, its fair skin and freckles, signs of her native Brittany. "It seems that you are a balanced figure, with some tendencies to be authoritarian. You strive for perfection. Your sexual drive is important." I waited. "That's all?" I said, searching into her calm green eyes. I wanted her to talk for hours. "Yes." She put the sheet of paper down. "That's about it." She had spoken as succinctly as the oracle of Apollo at Delphi. Where do you see all of that?" "You cross your T's with an excessively long line, which, more than crossing the T's, is covering the whole word. You punctuate very clearly. You exert considerable pressure with your pen. The lower halves of your letters, the dipping parts of your F's and your G's, are well hung." Wow, even my handwriting revealed my obsession with sex? Was that important to a future employer? We have to apply several modifications to your curriculum vitae. While I frantically tried to come up with ways to change my handwriting, Yvonne explained how the 10 pages of the information should be rearranged, exactly the opposite of what I had learned. This is how we do it in France. She paused. But wait, I have a better idea. She removed her glasses, stood up, and her green eyes flitted. We should consult one of the many books on the subject. She turned around and faced to the bookshelves behind her. She stood on her tiptoes till her pink heels stood out of her black pumps and removed a book from the top. Here it is. She showed me a volume named Le CV Parfait. Lots of ideas here for you. An académicien has written it. My heart plunged as I thought of having to completely redo my whole CV. Why did the French have to insist on such perfection? Maybe it was just my day, or maybe it was the wine and cigarettes, but my head was swirling as I walked back to André's after dinner with Yvonne, up Rue des Trois Frères, struggling to stay on the narrow sidewalk, squished between parked cars and tilting buildings, although I finally resolved for the middle of the street, even if the cold cobblestones were slippery and uncomfortable. Now, I had to go back, tear up the literature I'd been working on for weeks, read a French book on the correct way of writing a CV, rewrite the shit, translate it into French, then write dozens of cover letters in grade school handwriting, and make sure that my F's and my G's were less well hung.
Eh bien voilà, mes amis, c'est tout pour aujourd'hui. That's it for today, my friends. Join me for our next show of The Secret Diaries of a Gay Gynecologist in Paris, a memoir by Rafael Herrero, MD, PhD. Contact me at Rafael Herrero, RAFAEL.HERRERO.SF, like in San Francisco, at gmail.com. Au revoir, à la semaine prochaine, et vive Paris!
If you liked today's episode, would you please like my Facebook page? Search for A Gay Gynecologist in Paris. Please give me a hand and follow me as well on Twitter at Gay Gyno Paris with no spaces between the words, and share with me all your thoughts. Thank you, and see you next week. Salut mes amis, ici le gynécologue gay de Paris, The Gay Gynecologist in Paris. Suivez-moi sur Facebook. Vous pouvez me trouver sous Gay Gynecologist Paris. Faites-moi un like, s'il vous plaît. Vous pouvez me suivre aussi sur Twitter, at Gay Gyno Paris. Ça s'appelle JAYGYNO, Paris comme la ville Paris. Répandions le bonheur et soyons tous amis sur Facebook and Twitter. Au revoir, beaucoup de bisous et à bientôt.